Well, good day, everyone. I am Cliff Matthews, the pastor of the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church, Charlotte, North Carolina. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of In the Know, our popular, fast growing, well received web show that is taking somebody by storm, right? It has been phenomenal. We have had a great time. I'm enjoying this format. I'm enjoying the comments. I'm enjoying this opportunity to meet folk and to talk about things that many of you think are important. We have back, by popular demand, Mr. DJ Boyd, Minister DJ Boyd, Minister of Worship and Arts at the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church, Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm pastor. He serves as Minister of Worship and Arts. We had part one and we got into it, and time got away because there's so much to talk about when it comes to worship and arts and the Black church and the future of it. So we decided to do part two, and here we are, part two. And Mr. Boyd, thank you for coming back.
My pleasure. Thank you for continuing this, as you say, robust conversation.
Robust is a good word. The robust
Yeah.
conversation. So we left off, and we were just getting into the impact of COVID upon church. I want to say church, Black church, and I want to say upon worship and arts in the Black church. And we had begun that conversation. We talked about how it changed everything and there is no going back.
Mhm.
Tell me, how have you seen the changes or the impact of COVID? How are they playing out both at St. Luke, but broader in your profession as you dialogue with other ministers of worship around the country? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you sensing? What are you feeling?
As we said, it did change everything. In our part one, we talked about COVID literally having to shut down the world, to shut down churches. Our pivot was good. I'm so proud of us still, how we stepped up to the plate, did a lot with little. We made it work. If people came,
Hmm.
how we actually had to get it done, they'll be like, oh, this is a lot. And
Hmm.
I'm proud of our staff and our team for stepping up to do that. But during that time, of course, people had no choice but to only view it online. There was no physical in the building. Even when we came back, the uneasiness of being in a space that could still breed COVID, it's moments even to this day, is better. But even I think people come sometimes with a mask on and say, I'm here, but I don't know.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we have to be sensitive to that. The fellowship changed, and how we do that. There was definitely no passing of the peace. There was everybody, you sit on your row and
Hmm.
you keep it moving. But what that did is, I think, psychologically
Mm.
impacted us.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say for good or bad. I think it happened, and we have to understand how do we keep moving in God to do His work at churches. But it did change everything. People are more introverted, even if they were extroverted. They're now more closed in versus being
Mm.
out and open and embracive. And so people are still shifting in their minds to deal with that. Also, too, what it did for people, we gave them options. Even to this day, all churches have options. If you
Mhm.
don't want to physically come to the church, you have an option now to view it online and get just as much, sometimes even better quality of
Mhm.
hearing and understanding worship. So they have options now.
Mhm.
With that, and this is not a personal thing, with options, because we don't get the option, we got to be there.
Mhm.
So with options, it is allowed now our volunteers to say, hey, I think I'm going to stay home today.
Yes.
And that's okay. I think I'm going to just watch the worship from afar. The hard part is that when you're leading in worship, and I'm not just talking about minister, staff, musician, whomever, but
Mhm.
even choir members, volunteers for ushering or anything. If you serve in any kind of capacity where people are depending on you collectively or individually, is put in a strain on how we do ministry, because it's like people. You can I have this on this conversation. So when the pandemic happened, it felt real good for us to not have to be in church on Sunday morning. Did it not?
You tell your story. Don't tell mine.
I
Don't
ain't
tell.
gonna,
Don't
well,
tell mine
it
because
felt
yeah.
good to me because
Hey,
when
well,
you have done this your whole life, I don't know what it is to not be in church on Sunday. Of course, we
say that.
thankful for vacation time. We can get away.
Hmm.
It's not like the church is holding us at bay and say you can't go. But it's one of those callings that you feel like even when you're away, you're not supposed to be away. You feel
Hmm.
guilty about it.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
things like, and you told me and staff, like, look, take care of yourselves. This church is going to be all right with or,
Yeah.
and that felt good. And now we're of course back into the rhetoric of it has to be every week, but still
Hmm.
get that mindset of like, look, take care of you.
Hmm.
I think because in church, a lot of times what we do is we guilt shame people for not showing up, for not doing this, for not being
Say
involved.
that.
And so people are like, look, you can do that all you want to. I'm going to live. If I want to go watch the football game on Sundays, I'm going to watch football game and I'll come back to Jesus on Monday.
On Monday. That's right. And that is so true. This whole issue of guilt shaming, and it's happening, right?
Mhm,
Um, and I think that happened to staff at church. So let's go. The pandemic hit.
mhm.
Everybody was on lockdown. So we get to the vaccination point. It's 2021, and people are now pushing when we coming back to church,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then I can't talk for you. I can talk for myself and say there was a level of guilt shaming, like, so why aren't we back in church? And what I found ironic, let's get in trouble again,
come on.
those that were pushing to get back in church weren't the ones who came back to church, but they wanted to make sure that we were working, huh? Because they want to have Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'll be transparent, just like you were. I would tell you all of us had to pivot during COVID. I took on a job as a therapist or a mental health professional within the local jail, and I loved it,
Mhm.
right? We would pre record our worship services because we had that ability and we invested in technology, uh, a lot of investment in technology because the good people of St. Luke did it. And it allowed us to come in on a Thursday and we'll be bone tired and we'll get there about 6 o'clock. I'll get there about 7. And we will stay sometimes, I know for a fact, until 11. And we would go through segments and try to get it right. And we'll finally get it right.
Mhm.
And driving home at 11 o'clock, stopping uh, at a
Wendy.
McDonald's drive through or Wendy's, yes, that's still open,
Mhm.
but knowing we did Sunday and then Sunday being able to actually stay in bed,
Listen.
listen, and watch and chime in,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And there are several ministries that pivoted completely
mhm,
to online and are not coming back
mhm.
because they found that this is a good media. So tell me, and now the guilt shaming now, not only did it happen to staff in COVID saying, let's get back to church, but now I see ministry leaders guilt shaming people who have options.
Yeah.
And I heard of one church this week, I heard about this, that actually killed its online feed. In other words, if you want to get this, you're going to have to come in here and get it.
Mm.
But what they realize is you didn't get the folk back in church. They just went to another online church
Right. Right.
because
Right.
what COVID did, listen, whether we like it or not, what COVID did was help folk know that, oh my God, I'm gonna say this and it's gonna sound so anti-church, but it's not. What COVID did was help folk know you have a life apart from this, and that
Mm.
I have options,
Mhm.
and I don't have to do this like I've done it. And so now we're living in that place where we have options, and We have people who are exercising. As you mentioned, I'm a therapist also. And one of the things that is crucial in my social work therapy as a social work therapist is the whole issue of autonomy.
Mhm.
Don't take from people the right to choose because that's a violation of our code of ethics, but it's also not good practice, right?
Mhm.
People have choice. You're here because you want to be here, and I need to affirm that. Thoughts about that?
I love it, Pastor. So what happens is that when people now in COVID, when they said, okay, I'm not feeling it, I'll just do worship later on, giving them that option gave them freedom.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, we really gonna get in trouble. Now I think
Say it,
that
man. Come
if,
on.
if we, I think if we look at Jesus's ministry and how he did church,
Hmm.
it wasn't four walls, of course. Church was literal, ongoing. But we were set up in the social construction of we're going to do church once a week, and we're going to show up and we have to produce once a week. And so now we're tied to the chain of we got to produce every week. I don't
Mhm.
care what happens. You better come on Sunday morning with a sermon.
You better say it.
The Lord spoke or not. You better have a sermon for the people.
And yes, because that's what's expected. You're right.
It's
Go ahead.
expected. I better make sure that worship is good, informative, fresh. They don't want to hear the same stuff every week.
Hmm.
Give
Hmm.
them something new, and that's a whole nother conversation. But
Hmm.
understanding that they're coming expecting something, and
Hmm.
we have to produce every week. Now, we're not going to talk much about this probably, but do you remember the great surge of the great resignation of many pastors? And
Yes, I do.
we was like, look, we burned out, and trying
Hmm.
to do this every week is draining. I
Hmm.
love it. We love what we do because we love people. We love serving God.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, we've got to understand that there has to be balance.
Yes.
There's got to be a moment to unplug. You can't
Yes.
keep going this race doing the hard work all the time. And again, like I said in the first part, this is hard work because you're putting yourself at the mercy of people at
Hmm.
all times. And I love it. I mean, this is what we signed up for. We do it because we know we have a calling on our lives. But it does get tiring, and everybody just needs a break. And so, what COVID has done is showing people you got to lean into that break. You're human.
Hmm.
Everybody needs a reset. So
Hmm.
that's just
Wow. That is so true. Um, One of the things that we just talked about it, COVID gave options. Those churches that wanted to lean into it,
mhm,
it gave them options, right? Um, Now, the reality is when we shifted and embraced those options, that was a good thing.
mhm,
So one of the if you look at a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, when you look at opportunities, COVID gave us this amazing opportunity to reach beyond our walls and to really have an impact,
mhm,
right? No longer are we. Now, some larger churches already had it going on, but I think for the small, mid-size, medium, large, not mega church, some COVID gave an opportunity to actually reach the world. We had people watching our broadcast who were service members overseas,
mhm,
right? You wouldn't have had that normally.
mhm,
That's an opportunity. Now the threat is our members are doing the same thing. They're able to watch services now and tie into services that may come from mega ministries that
mhm,
have a lot more bank, that have a lot more talent. Not that St. Luke isn't talented, but if you have a church of 20,000, versus a church of a couple of hundred, you just by law of averages have more talent in the house,
mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
So now that opportunity becomes a threat because now we're having to compete
Compete.
with what they see. So
Yeah,
before it was compete with what I hear on the radio.
yeah.
Now you're competing with what they see in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, Chicago. These New York, these are places where you have these mega ministries that are really pulling folk. And how do you feel about that? Because it's kind of like that is again the opportunity was to send this around the world. The threat is our members can also now go around the world and we have more competition. What is the pressure on us to be on a game every Sunday when we're going live as opposed to doing a pre-recorded piece that we could edit and smooth out?
Yeah.
I could preach two sermons in a week if I had to, if the first was bad, right? But when you're live, there is no do-over. Like
Nope.
what Jennifer Lewis say on Blackish, there's no do-over in Black church. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's none.
No.
So thoughts about that?
It has become even more, and when I say stressful, I don't mean that in a way of like, oh my god, like he's just beat down, tired of just doing this. No, it's something that we welcome. But what happened is before, like we said, we were producing some things, but you had to be in house to get it. Now on Sunday mornings, if anything goes awry,
Mm,
it's live.
yeah.
If there's a moment that you just can't get it together, or and meaning like just thoughts and clarity, and sometimes when we have an edited moment, then you can kind of say, no, let's redo that, let's put that here.
Mhm.
There's no redos, there's no edits, and so the pressure of being on is even harder. This is what happens is people don't understand that they see people, they see talent, they see a minister music, they see a pastor, but they don't understand is when they compare St. Luke to a West Angeles to a Metropolitan to a anybody
Mhm.
church,
Mhm.
is they
Mhm.
think like, well, why we don't get the same sound? Why do we don't get the same look? Why we don't get the same whatever? Um, because again, that's numbers, that's people, that's resources, and we're grateful because again for us,
Mhm.
even what we do, we know that people do less than this, but whatever medium, whatever platform they have, they got what they got.
Mhm.
We're leaning into knowing that if we really want to be a ministry that affects the world and not just Charlotte and not just our area, this is a must. This is a must because number one, our people deserve quality. And one of the things
Mhm.
I'm so proud about St. Luke is we do so much with so little. So
Mhm.
much with so little. Um,
Mhm.
so we always are trying to find ways to step it up, to do better, to offer things for our community, that that we can do. And so I'm just so proud that. But every Sunday morning, it's now that sound has to be right. If a mic is not loud enough or too loud, or we can't hear, we can't see, what happened to this? It's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah. It's a real push, right? And that push is unbelievable. And I would say sometimes almost unbearable. And there's so many eyes on, and there's so much pressure to deliver. And what I have found, again, going back to part one, is the best thing I can do is be the Cliff Matthews that I am. I am not a TD Jakes. I am not a Wesley Howard.
mhm,
I am not, other folk, right? I'm Cliff Matthews. I have a uniqueness about me that God placed at St. Luke.
mhm.
And what I have to do is trust that my uniqueness, when I flow in who I am, in the context that I am in, because the context is still St. Luke. We're not broadcasting General Church, we're broadcasting St. Luke. If
Our
I
brand.
stay who I am, I need to trust God that that's enough
That's
because at the end of the day, God placed me as St. Luke. How do you feel about, again, we've talking about it again, that saying no to the pressure to
mhm.
be something that you're not, and just trusting God? It's just a constant battle.
I know that we always want to appeal to the masses.
Mhm.
Um, the pressure of trying to, well, I'll say this, and this is education for people that may not realize this. Whenever when we're planning worship music and planning worship services, It's never about what DJ wants to hear, what he's listening to. Now, of course, I have influences. If I hear something, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's never a DJ's top 10. And so when we plan for music and worship, we plan it in a holistic way. But so we reach out to think of, we got children, we got young adults, we got seniors, we've got all kind of things that people are accustomed to, what they like, what they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start trying to, we try to make sure that we feed everybody. I'll say it this way. I've
Yes.
said this
Yes.
before. When we plan worship, we are feeding God's people. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't want somebody to come to the church hungry, but don't
Mm-hmm.
get fed because you didn't offer them something at the table.
Right.
That is challenging because some churches just have a traditional service. Some just have a contemporary service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what you're going to get. You're going to, if
Mm-hmm.
you go to a contemporary service, you're going to hear contemporary music.
Mm-hmm.
What's your traditional, get traditional.
Mm-hmm.
However, in our worship content, and you and I both agree on this, it's a both and. It's not like either or.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yeah.
preach about us. Even in the preach word, you know that that word has to reach a large audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so the audience no longer is just in the house either.
Mm-hmm.
That audience is abroad. I tell choir members all the time that don't just think about looking in the congregation and saying, this is our audience. Our audience is the world.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
understanding that brings a whole nother dynamic of how we do worship service. But again, being almost authentic selves. I know people that can play circles around me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not threatened by that.
Mm-hmm.
I know the giftings that I have,
Say that.
and I understand my strengths and weaknesses. So whatever I can't do, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to bring somebody around us that can. Because again, it creates a better collaborative effort, but
Mm.
also to just understanding that's how you grow.
Wow. Wow. You mentioned this image of we have to feed everybody, right? And I think that is so true. And the caveat that I say, I think you'll agree with this, that when I grew up, I'm gonna use this as an analogy. My mother cooked, Miss Hazel Leonard cooked,
Hmm.
Miss Leola Butler cooked.
Hmm.
And if they cooked the same meal,
Hmm.
it didn't taste the same. So basically, what I'm saying is everybody's feeding. It just not be may not be the seasoning that you like,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that doesn't mean the food isn't good.
Right. Right.
Yeah, our challenge is to really make sure that we're clear. Oh my God, that scripture's real. If we lift him up
He'll do the drawing.
and he'll draw what God intends for St. Luke. And I just think that's just part of what keeps us from running ourselves into a fit trying to be everything to all people, right?
I'll say this: McDonald has a brand.
Mm, say that.
Chick-fil-A has a brand.
I like where you're going.
If they all try to say, "Oh, look, they're selling burgers over there. We
Yeah,
should start selling burgers."
yeah,
Oh, look, the consistency of being who you are. People can handle who you are once they know who you are. When they come into a space and know, I'm like, what is this? Like when they can't
yes.
put their finger and say, "Oh, I belong," because I understand that this it works for what I want. And again,
Hmm.
are like McDonald's, it's like Burger King. You can get whatever you want. You got to go to a place that feeds you.
Say that.
Whether that's preaching, music, whatever you need.
Hmm.
If St. Luke is a place, great. We love
Hmm.
you to have you here. If another church is what you need, great. Go and get what you need.
Mm,
But again, for these churches that are trying to do it all,
mm.
it's too much.
Yeah.
And there's
And,
no
and
identity.
yeah, and then for members to put pressure on leadership, on staff to be all, to
Mhm,
do like what they do there.
mhm,
We're not there. There is a distinct difference between a burger from Burger King versus McDonald's.
mhm,
One is charbroiled, the other is placed on just on the skillet. The point
mhm,
I'm saying is a grill. We got to be who we are. When I think about St. Luke's worship context or worship culture, this is how I defined it as I was reflecting yesterday, because that's how I do, right?
mhm.
How would you describe the worship culture at St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church? And here's what I came up with. we are tradition with a twist, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The twist is we are traditional, right? So, and probably in some ways, maybe a little, it may look a little Methodist or a little Baptist in some ways because we have our calls to worship, our confessions. Um, we have uh, we have a focus on service music,
Mhm.
right? And all of that. But the twist is that we are a church that's committed to being a church where folk who have been hurt in tradition can come in. The twist is we are whosoever church.
Whosoever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk, sir.
I love the fact, and I know people can give us pushback on anything, but we know who we are.
Yeah.
And so we're confident in that. We're always growing, we're always learning. So I don't want people to think like, oh, they're stuck. A lot of people think of tradition as stuck, as stale, as they just do it the same way all the time. No, that's not who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in a perfect world, the way we plan worship is people should show up not knowing what's going to happen,
Mm.
meaning that there's an expectancy, there's a energy that's like, I got to get there because I need to be a part of this. Whatever's going to happen, I want to be amazed. I want to be surprised. There's an element
Mm-hmm.
of let's try this. Let's do this a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, having a traditional format so that it doesn't go so far left. Like you can't show up every week like, Lord, this is a circus. I don't know what's going to happen today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some people need that consistency of knowing like, okay, these are things that I know that I can go and get there. But the element of surprise, meaning that, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. 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 Wow. Well,
I love
so yeah. So we are about out of time again. This is a this is crazy. But what do you see as the future of worship and arts at St. Luke, and let's say of the Black church at large?
I see. I'll speak for St. Luke first, and then I'll talk at large. Um, I think for us, we see, I see, and I pray that God allows us to be a part of it. And if not, then we move on and somebody else takes it. But I see in the future for us that we are going to be a church or leaning into a church that is unapologetically who we are.
Yeah, say that.
There's so many things that we do in that the world that Charlotte may not know. I think we have a unique space. And when we say the whosoever will, that's literally when
Mm-hmm.
people say, would I be received here? Would I be welcome?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a hands down question of yes.
Yes.
We can talk forever. I literally just had a friend to text me, and he's church hurt, and what that means, people, is that not the church itself hurt them, but the people in church have hurt this person
Mm-hmm.
so much that they're not willing to try church again. They're
Mm.
done with church, done because of the way they've been received and treated in church and preached down to and said, "You're going to hell. You're no
Mm.
good." And so this person asked me literally this week. I'm not making this up. He
Mm-hmm.
said, "If I come to St. Luke, would I be welcome?" I didn't have to think about that.
No.
Now there are some churches that are like, well, you might want to dress this way. You might want to put on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want you to feel. I want you to feel comfortable. And this person's not black either. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure, no, you will be welcomed here.
Yes.
And 2 weeks ago, you preached a sermon on what was the title? Agape love, agape fellowship.
Yes. Yes.
You see the response of the people, unrehearsed, uncoerced,
Mm.
saying, "Yes, that's who we are." Anyone is welcome
Yeah.
here. I was like, "That's it. They
That's
get
who
it.
we
They
are.
get it. That's who we are." And so, what that looks like, of course, branches off to many other things. But I just see that being really the forefront,
Mm-hmm.
being a place for all people. And people are going to look back on St. Luke in a few years and be like, "Oh, they did that about 20 years ago."
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
push the envelope, and we understand
Yeah.
that you don't just preach things that are popular. I
Mm-mm.
don't just play and introduce music that's popular,
Mm-mm.
because
Mm-mm.
here's the thing that people have to understand: this head and heart.
Mm.
I've really been dealing with that, Pastor,
Mm-hmm.
because again, when we come to worship or wherever you are, if this is not there, If you're
Yeah.
not there and connected, you're doing yourself a disservice. So what we do in worship is asking people to lean into, bring your whole self, bring your head and your heart, but bring
Yes.
people understanding that we want to grow, we want to do better, we want to do more. But that's really been on me. So I think that in the future for St. Luke, that looks positive. And I think that you and I've had this conversation. We just have to trust God's plan, that even those things that you probably think like, they ain't ready for this, they ain't ready for this.
Mhm.
There's too many churches that are saying that.
Yeah.
We're crippling our congregation, we're crippling our communities when we say like they're not ready. I think that we go there because if we know that God has spoken it and it's a thing that we need to do, we got to go there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow. One of the things that I would say as we close out that I am absolutely confident about, and it's kind of frightening, is that God has God's church, and that includes St. Luke.
mhm,
And I've seen so much to know that there have been times when it looked like this this bleep ain't gonna work.
we've been there.
This is it.
This is it.
Only to see it hit bottom. And then it's like the Spirit of God says, now let me do the work. Right. And so I have no doubt about St. Luke. And I do value the fact that we must always be in our worship and our in the work of the people. We've got to be this place. We say a whosoever church, also a voice that's crying in dry spaces, just telling folk, listen, there's love,
There's
listen, there's God,
like,
and that may not always be comfortable, but I do believe we can trust God to take care of us.
yeah,
What you think about that as we close out?
I agree. Amen. God has his hand on St. Luke. God has his hands on the church universal. God is doing
Hmm.
what God needs to do. Uh,
Hmm.
God is not absent. I know a lot of people think like church is different. It is. We can't deny it. We cannot.
Hmm.
Um, some things I do question what people do in church and like, is that God? Like, why? What was the reasoning for doing this?
Yeah.
But that's just for me to question. But if God is in it, then let God be God. Um, and I think again, if we do the lifting, let Him do the drawing. I think a lot of times
Hey,
we be like,
glory.
what are people at? What are people at? Well,
Hmm.
God is not. He's not doing it that way. He said, if you lift me up,
Hmm.
I'll draw who I need to be in this space.
Hmm.
I'll
Hmm.
draw who I need to be in this space.
Hmm.
And churches
Hmm.
have to identify that there's a place for everyone, and people get to pick and choose where they worship, how they worship, and so that's who we are.
Wow. So thank you, Mr. Boyd. I hear our takeaways from this two-part interview has been that worship matters.
It does.
Um, Authenticity in worship matters,
Yes.
and that there is a need to always trust the founder of the church, the author of the church, to take care of the church, trusting that at the end of the day, God's going to be God. So, wow, that's our takeaways. Listen, everybody, thank you all again for watching In the Know. Love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think about these two interviews. Um, I appreciate your support. Thank you for helping us do this. And believe it or not, this is what it means also to worship, to honor
Mhm.
Christ, right?
Mhm.
So thanks again for all of that. Mr. Boyd, I appreciate your time on these two sessions. Listen, everybody, God loves you, and so do I. Thank you for being in the know. Take care.
Thank you all.